Welcome to the Chapter 3 highlights covering key graphs 5 through 9. These are single shifting curves, so let's get started. We know that the demand curve shifts because of what merits demand. We'll talk about that in a second, but the idea here is the entire curve is shifting. Not just a point on the curve, but all of the points on the curve. So essentially, the curve itself, all of those individual points at price and quantity that make up the demand curve, all of those points would be shifting as a result of what we see here in key graph 3. Now, what shifts those points, all of those points along the curve, what shifts ultimately the demand curve? It could be market size, the number of consumers that are in a particular market. And that could shift to the left if it's decreasing and shift to the right if it's increasing. Future expectations. If we have expectations that something's going to happen that's going to be great for demand, to shift it to the right, or consequently something that's going to be disastrous for demand, that could shift it to the left. Related prices. Now, the price, remember, is not a demand shifter of the good itself, but we do know that related prices of related goods, and we mentioned the price of hot dogs could impact the demand for hot dog buns. If the price of hot dogs goes up, the demand for hot dog buns could shift to the left. If the price of hot dogs drops, then demand for hot dog buns could shift to the right. So this can have quite an effect on the demand curve for the related product, the related good. Income is also a factor that can shift demand. If we're in recessionary times and people are losing jobs, then you're going to see demand shift to the left. If you're seeing great times and people are getting wage increases and going out and shopping more and consumer confidence is up, then that could shift the demand curve to the right. And then taste and preference. As our taste and preferences are being changed by what we're seeing, hearing, thinking, experiencing new products that shift our taste or preference for that product, can shift the demand curve to the right. And likewise, if there's an outbreak of a norovirus or something bad, could shift that demand curve inward or leftward. But we know price is never a demand shifter. It only moves along the curve. It only affects quantity demanded. Price does not shift demand itself. Now, with supply, same thing. We talked about downward sloping demand curve. Let's talk about upward sloping supply curve for a second. This is the idea that all of the points along that curve are shifting in the supply curve. So this is not quantity supplied that's changing, but all of the quantity supplied points are changing along the curve. The entire curve is moving. Price is not something that moves this curve. It is what we think T.R.I.C.E for supply. So technological changes, improvements, and efficiencies, that could shift the supply curve to the right. Likewise, a technology virus or a worm or something discovered in software that's causing negative technology changes could shift the supply curve to the left. Related prices can also shift supply. If we see there are any complements in products that as a result of an increase in supply of those products, it could also mean a shift in supply for the product we're referring to. Mostly what we see here when it's a related price shift, it's usually taxes or subsidies, the government's action that is impacting here. So if increasing taxes is being imposed on this product, that could shift supply to the left. If they're cutting taxes, that would shift supply to the right. And conversely, if you have subsidies, the more subsidies being offered, the greater the supply. The fewer subsidies, the more supply would shift inward. Input prices and availability of those resources also has an impact here. And this is what goes into creating that product. So if there is something in the supply that's actually shifting that curve, that would cause, depending on its availability, that would cause a shift to the right if it's more available and shift to the left if it's less available. The fourth item then is competition. If there are more people in the market that are selling and supplying this product, then obviously that shifts supply to the right. If there are fewer of them, they're going out of business and whatnot, that would shift supply to the left. And again, we see expectations here. If there are expectations, and this is why we hear so much about markets moving on expectations and whatnot, because expectations can really be a shifting point for supply and for demand, depending on what is happening in terms of those changes. So you have to look very carefully at the scenarios to determine whether it's supply that's shifting or demand. But again, price is not a supply shifter. It only moves the quantity supplied along the curve. So that leads us to Key graph 5, the idea of equilibrium at an upward sloping supply curve, downward sloping demand curve, a price level at P1, a quantity level at Q1. This is both allocatively and productively efficient. Why? Because there are no shortages and no surpluses. What is being produced is being sold. There's no extra that's available at the end, no surpluses. And there's also no pent-up demand that's leading to shortages. So every buyer and seller is advantaged in this marketplace. It is terribly efficient in that respect. So when we see the idea of this supply that is being oversupplied at a higher price than demand is willing to pay, we see there is a surplus, as you see here. And likewise, if we have demand that is greater than what is being supplied at that lower price, that would lead to a shortage. And you've probably read about it then in Krugman or experienced that in going through MindTap. But the idea here and what we're going to talk about today are some shifts in either the demand or supply curve and what impact that has on price and quantity. That's really what we want to look at in these key graphs 6 through 9, is the idea of what is happening to price and quantity and equilibrium in terms of this shift in demand or supply. So that's what we're going to take a look at in terms of what is happening. Now in this example, you see the supply curve is shifting to the right. What's happening first, we should look at equilibrium. We go from E1 to E2, and that is showing us that the equilibrium is changing from E1 to E2. That means the price level is falling, the quantity is increasing. More supply is available. Maybe technology has allowed us to make these more efficiently, and as a result, we can make more of them. So supply curve shifts to the right, price level drops, quantity increases. And all of that we see just by one shift in the curve. So that leads us to key graph 6. Now I'm going to go through these graphs, but you stop or pause however you need to in order to copy these down. And I suggest you do it before you let me narrate about it. So if you need to pause here, copy the graph down, then hit play, that's a great idea. But key graph 6, let's talk about it, is basically, again, all of these are perfectly competitive graphs, but we're looking at a shift in the curve. In this case, it's demand that is shifting. So that means what merits demand. Maybe it's a market expectation. Maybe it's a related price of a related good. Maybe it's a taste and preference, but the curve is shifting to the right, D1 to D2. Notice we've labeled it D1 and D2. Equilibrium also changing. Notice the arrow that is here in terms of that shift. From E1 to E2, it's telling us there's also a higher price level with that demand that's shifted. We're leading to a higher price level, but a larger quantity, because we know with law of supply, as the price level rises, more people are going to want to offer that good for sale. They want to make money off of the incentive of the profit motive. Also notice there is a legend here now that is telling us what is happening to price and quantity, and it's an important piece of your graph. Make sure you include that in terms of very easily seeing that price is going up and so is quantity. They're both moving in the same direction if we see a shift in the demand curve. And that's key graph 6. Focusing now on key graph 7, again, pause if you need to. Key graph 7, what we see here is a shift in the demand curve to the left. This is a negative what merits demand in terms of something changing with market expectations, the market or of consumers, or the change in expectations or the taste and preferences. But this is leading to a lower price level, an equilibrium at E2 that is actually a price and quantity that is lower than it was at E1. The quantity also decreasing. So we see both price and quantity dropping here. Notice the arrow is moving leftward or inward. We have D1 and D2, D2 being the one to the left of D1 now, and our price and quantity are both falling. Key graph 8 is showing us a supply curve shift in this case. So now what we think T.R.I.C.E for supply, and the supply curve is shifting in a positive direction. We're producing more of this good. So maybe it's technological changes. Maybe it's the related price of inputs. We don't know what is happening, but the supply curve is shifting to the right. That's leading to a lower price level, a greater quantity, because we can produce more of it at a lower price. And so we see E2 then is at that lower price and greater quantity. So now we see a split in the price quantity shift, price moving lower, quantity increasing as a result. And again, the supply curve, the arrow to the showing that this S1 is moving to S2 to the right. And lastly, key graph 9. We see here that this is a supply curve that is shifting to the left. So maybe a technology breakdown happened. Maybe there was a problem with the software. Maybe there was a problem with the related price of inputs that's going into this that is causing problems. We see a shift with the supply curve. And again, the arrow is moving left. S2 is to the left of S1. We see it's leading to a higher price level, a smaller quantity as a result of that shift in the supply curve. E2 now at a price level above E1, but a quantity that is also to the left of E1. So price level rising, quantity decreasing, and that is the shift leftward or inward, leading to a higher price level, a smaller quantity in key graph 9. I hope you found this helpful. Please feel free to go back and take a closer look if you need to. There are some activities related to these key graphs that we'd like you to do before moving on to key graphs 10 through 13. Have a great day.